Okay, so now that we've looked at the properties that apply towards the container, right? The item container right here. So say display flex and other properties that we've discussed previously. Now we will look at the properties that apply to each individual item. So let's start off first with the order. So with the order property, you basically have the capability of ordering these items along the main axis. For example, here I have item 1, item 2, item 4. I can also order them in such a way that item 4 comes first. So let me show you this. And before I show you that, the default order for all items is 0. So even if it's not shown here explicitly, the default order is 0. So they're all about the equal order, default order, and they'll flow in this direction in the main axis. So if I made this item 4 a much lower order, it should start first now. For example, if I go -1 here for item 4, this item here, and there you go. So item 4 now displays first. So in the same way, I could sort of display them 4, 3, 2, 1. So remember that the lowest order one has to come first. So let's make this one 0. And then I'm going to make the second one, item 3, I'm going to make it 1. And then item 1 should be about, well, first I'll have to go to item 2 first. So item 2, I'll set at 3. And then item 1, I'll set at 4. So this will be the highest order, and it should appear here. And now if I refresh, and there we go, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's aligned this way in the main axis. And speaking of axis, there's another property that you should be aware of. It's called align self. So for example, let's just say I wanted to take this item and I want to align it. And align self, by the way, works in the cross-axis direction. So we have our main axis here, default, and then we go align self. So we align it along the cross-axis, either at the top, the middle, at the bottom. These are the main ones that you really need to know. So I'll just show you how this works. So for example, I'm going to take item 3 here, and I'm going to go align self. And there are 3 main properties that you should be aware of, right, to form part of essential knowledge. So flex start will basically be the beginning of the cross axis, so here at the top. So flex start, let's just show this. If I didn't make any syntactical errors, it should work. There we go. So it starts here at the top. Of course, it shrunk a little. It sort of came out of the flow here. And I could go center. That's another value for this property. And of course, you've guessed it. It should align to the center of the cross axis. And in a similar way, I could just say flex end. And these are the essential ones that you need to know. There are certainly other ones like baseline and stretch. But for now, for essential knowledge and for most practical applications, you have to know flex start, center, and flex end in that order. So what other properties exist here? Well, there's flex grow. So flex grow basically says take up how much space. So let me just show that how this works. So here, let me just remove all these orders here in the first place. Okay. And let's just remove this one. And let's just say, as you can see here, this is some extra space left. So flex grow by default is 0 for all of them. So if I say flex grow is equal to 1, then I'm just saying, let this item grow to fill up the rest of the space that's available proportionally. So let me just go to item 4 here. Item 4, and I say flex dash grow, and I set it to 1. Remember, by default, they're all 0. Flex grow to 1, so you can see it grew to be 1. What if I were to take item 2 and I say flex grow equal to 2? Well, again, it will proportionally distribute the space based on this relativistic measure. So there you go. Relativistically now, item 2 will have the greatest grow because it has the highest grow here. Item 1, item 2 are 0. Item 4 should be the second largest item, where we have flex grow of 1, and item 2 should be the largest item because it has a flex grow of 2. So that's how the flex grow works. And the flex shrink property here, flex shrink basically means that it will shrink at a certain rate. So for example, let me just remove all the flex grows here. And item 4 now is flex shrink. And I don't know if you're going to see this. So let me just shift the background color for item 4 to red. And then I'm going to shift this to screen size here. And to shift the screen size, make sure you have the consoles here, the developer tools. You go developer tools, for example, if you're using Chrome browser, you go here to more tools. You click on developer tools and you should see console and all this other stuff here. So I'm just going to use this to, instead of shrinking the window, I'm going to use this to shrink the browser here. So I'm just shrinking. Hang on. Background color should be red. So I should refresh first. There we go. So now I'm going to shrink this. And I don't know if you noticed, but this item is slightly smaller. because of the flex shrink property. In fact, let me just see if I can exacerbate or just make this more visible. Let me make this 10. I'm not so sure if you can see this, but if you look at the base length here, you notice that this has the smallest value. So it's kind of similar to flex scroll, but it sort of shrinks at a certain rate, and it's more noticeable depending on the browser that you're using, for example. So the other property that you have to be aware of is called the flex. Find the default size of an item before the remaining space is distributed. So the flex basis basically assigns the size before a right space distribution. So let me just show you how this works. So for example, let me just apply this to item, let's just say item 2, and I say flex basis like so, and then I give it a value of 100 pixels. So this will be 100 pixels by default before there's some space distribution. So what we see here is that it's much longer. And let me just go to 100 pixels. So it's visible. There you go. So 200 pixels, see that? It's 200 pixels. So, and if I shrink it a little bit, so shrink some, at some point, it's almost the same size here, right? So that'll be the default value if there's available space anyway. If no space is available, this will just grow up to 100 pixels, and then we'll have some space remaining. So that's how flex basis basically works. It was right. It says the default size of an item before remaining space is distributed. So remember that. And of course, now that we've touched on flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis, there's certainly a shorter hand to do this. For example, here, I can just say flex, right? And then I have to list 3 values. The first value will be flex grow. The second one would be flex shrink. And the third value would be flex basis. And one thing that you have to be aware of is that these 2 values here, optional. So you can only just have one value if you wanted to. Like your flex value, your first value is a grow value. Second value is a shrink value, and your third value is your flex basis value. So for example here, if I just say flex, and if I say 2, that means it will grow to be twice as much before when it comes to space distribution. So for example, proportionally, it will take up more space than all the other items, as you can see here. So that's flex. So that's the first value, we flex grow. The second value is flex shrink. Let me just put it at 0. And then the third value is the flex basis. So the default size before space distribution, I could just go 200 pixels, for example, 200 pixels. And just so you can see this, I'm just going to put this at 0. So by default, there we go. See, there it is. It's 200 pixels here, flex basis, as I spoke about before. And in the same way, 300 pixels, 400 pixels, and so forth and so on. So that will be the default size before space distribution takes place. And so these are like most of the essential properties that you would have to know here, that you have to put inside the container items themselves. So that's all for this video. Thank you very much.